Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. I'm here for the November issue of Stash Bash. This month we are bashing our stash of mists, and so in this video I'm going to cover 5 ways to use mists on cards. And Stash Bash is a bunch of crafters who get together and use up some supplies that we already have. So to get started, I just wanted to show you the mists that I've kept over the years. I have just this many left. Some of my favorites are the Heidi Swapp Color Shine, the Prima Color Bloom, the Hero Arts, and also Studio Calico, especially for their whites. So the first technique that I'm going to use is the basic use for mists, and the way that they're created in spray bottles is to just spray. So this is the easiest way to use mists. I just shook up my mist and I sprayed all over this little die cut tag here, and I am going to pull away some of that color with a dry paper towel, which is something you can do if you have pooling. And I'm going to use this tag to create a little snowy scene. I really like the look of white on craft this year, and so I thought creating some snow with the mist and then creating a little die cut snowman on top would be a really perfect, pretty snowy look. So I am also using a jewel picker to pick up some of those little die cut hearts. I'll have all the products that I used, including the mists and everything else, linked down below if you're curious about what I'm using. I'm going to take some foam adhesive and just put it on half of this little flag, because I want the rest of the flag to sit flush on the little snowman guy there. And so that completes the tag portion of it, except for some Nuvo crystal drops. This is another thing that I've really liked doing on my snowy backgrounds, is using just tiny little white dots created with the Nuvo crystal drops. And the way that I like to do these is to touch the tip to the paper, squeeze out a little bit, and then for me, especially with that white, it just comes out in this perfect little dot. So I'm going to put some Simon Says stamp shimmer cardstock on top of a card base that is 4¼ by 5½. I'm going to tie a little bit of some memory box ribbon on top of that tag and just cut some tails there by folding the ribbon in half and then cutting at an angle to create those tails. And I'm going to pop this entire tag up on the card front. You could just use the tag as is. You could flip it over and put a to and from on the back, but I really sometimes like using tags right on cards. I just think it keeps the focus on those little die cuts in the middle and the sentiment. The second way that I like to use mists on cards is to create splatters. And the easiest way to do this is to just unscrew the cap, and then you have some ink on the end of the tip there, and then just tap on that cap until you get some nice splatters. Or you could use a small paintbrush. So I like varying how I create my splatters, because you get a very organic look to your background. You have some splatters that are larger, some that are smaller, some are concentrated in a certain area, and I am using kind of a Roy G. Biv here. I don't think I have orange or violet, but I have some pink and yellow and green and blue, and so I'm kind of creating this fun rainbow background. This is so easy to do, and I think it gives a very artistic look. So it looks like it was more work than it was, and those are always fun cards to give and create. I die cut a little hello sentiment from some fun foam, and now I'm going to adhere some of those very pretty pink posh. They're the clear confetti, so they don't have the hole in the middle of the sequin. The third way to use mists on cards is to spritz it over a template. So I am going to use not watercolor paper, because I want the mist to sink into the paper rather quickly and dye it quickly, whereas with watercolor paper you want some time to be able to move that watercolor around. This, I really want it to sink in and create that really pretty background. This is a Hero Arts stencil, so I'm just taping down some of those sides with some painter's tape. I struggled a little bit, and I'm not sure why. I think I was just trying to get the painter's tape just on the edge of the template and make sure that I had it down really, really well. This time I'm using the Prima Color Bloom color spray, and they have a really nice handle nozzle, which is super convenient if you're spraying a lot or a large area. And you can see that the gold lame is actually really beautiful, a very metallic finish. So to complete this little card panel, I cut it down first of all, and then I am putting some embossing powder on top so that I can stamp and then heat emboss this sentiment from Paper Smooches, which says "Miss You," and I'm using black VersaFine ink and clear embossing powder. Now I'm going to put Thermoweb Memory Runner XL, which is a tape runner, all over because it does warp a little bit. But if you put it all over the back and then lay it down on some cardstock, you get a nice flat finish there. So I'm going to put that card panel on top of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white card base, and I must have cut the card panel a little bit too small, so I just trimmed down the card base. Just trim it down just a hair off maybe the end and one side, and then you won't have any problems. The next thing that I'm going to do is to amplify that sentiment a little bit. I felt like it was getting lost in that really busy background, so I grabbed my Tonic Studios Nuvo Crystal Drops in the black, and I'm just going to run over this by hand, which now my hand is not super steady to the point where it's perfect, but it does the trick. It gives a little dimension, and it definitely pops this sentiment a little bit more so that you can really see it on top of that really pretty gold but bold background. The last thing I'm going to do for this card is just add a few dots to complement that sentiment and make sure that it stands out as well. So for the next technique for misting on cards, I'm going to use the mists as watercolors, and I'm going to use this Arches watercolor paper because it's smooth, and I'm going to stamp and heat emboss. When I use my Misty with a cling mounted stamp, first I remove that foam that comes with the Misty, and this way your cling stamp will fit nicely inside the Misty. I'm going to ink up my entire background stamp. This is one of my favorites from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm inking it up with clear embossing ink from Simon also. And I can stamp this again since I used it in my Misty, but it looks pretty good. So I'm going to grab some Hero Arts white embossing powder and just pour it over the entire panel here. And I'm going to get an entire 6x6 piece of stamped and white heat embossed image on this watercolor paper, and that once I heat set that will set me up for the ability to watercolor on top of it, and that white will resist any of the watercolor. So I'm going to take some of the Heidi Swapp Color Shine mists, and I'm going to put them in the top of a watercolor palette and just use that as my palette. And I've used some water right on that panel there, and then I'm just painting away in each of those circles. I'm also flicking a little bit, and you can see it creates this really sweet, pretty kind of pastel looking watercolor background. Now I'm going to create this sentiment on some vellum, which I've cut down to a strip, and I'm going to use my Misty again because I have a feeling with this vellum I'm going to need to stamp it a couple of times, and as you can see I do. So I'm going to re-ink. I am using StazOn ink for the vellum so that it doesn't smear and it dries perfectly and won't come off, but I am going to stamp it a couple of times. Now my StazOn pad is a little drier, so maybe yours will only need to be stamped once, but mine definitely needed 2 or 3 stamps to make it really pop and make sure that the sentiment was nice and clear and totally black. So I'm going to use this strip right on top of our watercolor panel, and I've cut it long enough that I can wrap it around the panel. And so I'm going to just put some adhesive, just some tape runner on the back there. This way I can just fold it over and tuck it behind my panel, and I don't have to worry about trying to adhere the vellum down to the panel because it'll just be adhered to the back of the panel, which makes it really easy so you don't have to see the adhesive on the front. I'm going to adhere that card panel down to a card base. It's again a 4 1/4 by 5.5. This is a side opening and folding card so that I could have the horizontal card panel there. Now I'm just going to, of course, add some Tonic Studios Nouveau Crystal Drops. These are the jewel drops, and so they dry translucent with a hint of color, and I thought that would complement the light watercolor that I created on the background there. So I'm just going to use the blue and the green, and this creates some dimension and texture and also adds some shine, because other than the watercolor background, this is a pretty simple card, so I thought it'd be fun to have a little bit of dimension to it too. And I just love how easy it is to apply those Nouveau Crystal drops, and you'll see in the photograph how they dry so clear. The last technique for using mists on cards today is to color texture paste. So I have some white texture paste here, and I am coloring it with some different colors of mist. I think 2 of these were Heidi Swapp and 1 was the Prima. And you can see you get some blending, you get lots of texture from the texture paste, but it's just a really great way to extend your texture paste and create any color that you have of mist as well. So again, it's another way to use your mist and also another way to extend your texture paste and create colorful textured backgrounds. I decided to cut this one down into a circle because I didn't have great coverage on the edges there, and I'm going to pop up this large circle on a large card base that is a square. I believe it is 5.5 by 5.5, not 100% sure. And so once that is popped up there, that's pretty much the card base. I've cut out of gold foil cardstock a shadow or outline of this hello die. This is from Poppy Stamps. So in the one set you get the thin hello script, which I've cut out of black fun foam, but then you also get the outline or shadow, which I thought would be really fun in gold cardstock to match that gold texture paste that we created there. In order to adhere the very thin die cut of black fun foam, I am going to use some Ranger Multimedia Matte, and I have a really fine tip on it which allows me to get just little dots on all the places where I need the die cut to adhere to the card, and that is pretty much at least a couple of dots on each letter to make sure that the top and bottom adheres, because I want this to go through the mail without falling apart. So once I have that done, I just have to, it's a little tricky to get it adhered down without smushing it all over the paste. The great thing about the Ranger Multimedia Matte is that it dries in a matte finish, so you won't see it. So that has been 5 different ways to use up your mist stash on cards. Be sure to hop on over to Laura Whitaker's channel. I'm going to link to that here, and you'll see lots of other beautiful techniques in this entire Stash Bash hop. I want to thank you so much for stopping by today. If you want to see some more of my Stash Bash videos, those will be linked here. I'll also have a button for you to click and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and you can check out my website as well. So again, all my products will be linked down below, and again, thank you so much for stopping by. I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day.